My creepy neighbor pointed his telescope directly at my bedroom, and the police refused to take it seriously, so I took matters into my own hands. A few months ago, a man moved in across the street from me, and on his very first day, I noticed he had set up a telescope outside his window and aimed it directly at my bedroom. My first encounter with him came a few days later. He knocked on my door to introduce himself, and one of the first things he told me was, I was worth going to jail for. My blood ran cold, and the entire interaction was unpleasant. I closed the door on him, but he persisted until I opened it again, warning him not to come inside. He stared at me blankly, then walked away with a smile and without a word. I went back inside immediately after and ran up to my bedroom, and was not at all surprised to see that his telescope was still pointed at my bedroom. I remember taking a super long shower to hopefully clear my mind, but I could not settle it. Every sound I heard reminded me of him, and so the next day, I went to the police. I thought surely they would listen to me and explain the situation and how concerned I was. Unfortunately, I was reminded that as a woman, sometimes you are not taken seriously, even in situations like these, as the officers listened but seemed uninterested in what I had to say. One asked me if I was sure that I wasn't imagining things, and the other said it's not illegal to own a telescope and to come back when I have actual proof. Apparently him coming over and making such a remark was not enough either, as that was clearly just a distasteful joke in the eyes of the officers. I remember coming home defeated, and a few days later, just as I thought it would, things got worse. One evening as I was getting ready for bed, I noticed something through the window. His shadowy figure was hunched over the telescope as usual, but his movements were different, more frantic. I realized that he was rubbing one out while watching me, and again when he noticed that I was looking at him, he didn't stop. He started moving his hand faster, as if me watching him was exactly what he wanted, and just before I could leave the window, the movement stopped, and he took his hand out. I saw something drip from his hand and felt sick to my stomach. I actually went into the bathroom and got sick. I stayed awake all night that night, realizing that this truly was a nightmare, and that this man was a psychopath who would terrorize me to no end if someone didn't stop him. I stayed awake until the stations opened, and as soon as they did, I went back to the police. I told them what I had seen, explained that my eye bags were because I had not slept because of what I had seen, and desperately hoped they would understand the severity of the situation. I said that I was scared that he'd eventually find his way into my home somehow. I even told them about my ex and how he was a stalker. I went into detail about how after our relationship he kept visiting me at my job, kept running into me, leaving notes for me at my door. I said this all in an attempt to get them to understand. However, once again, I was reminded what it's like to be a woman. They told me that if I was so worried about him, then I needed to move or get better curtains. Another officer said that they needed concrete evidence, and my word just wasn't enough. It was clear that I wouldn't get any help from them unless it was too late. I knew I had to do something myself if I wanted this stranger to leave me alone. Weeks passed, and the stranger from the window tried to get closer and closer to me. I knew the second the gifts started appearing on my doorstep that this had gone too far. They were small things at first. Flowers, chocolates, a book I had once mentioned in a conversation at the local cafe when I was grabbing coffee with my best friend. Then, he started coming over and presenting these gifts to me in person. He would ask to hang out often, but I always told him I was busy. Things were getting extremely out of hand, and one evening he excitedly knocked on my door, holding a small box. He handed me the box to open. He seemed proud of himself. I found them together. They were in love, so I had to keep them together, forever. In the box were 2 frogs that he unalived himself and kept in a shoebox decorated in white. He called them Chris and Curtis. My stomach churned, and I forced a smile. I felt my insides boiling, however, and the taste of sick started creeping up on me. I have to go, I said, closing the door before running to the bathroom to get sick. He was a psychopath, a monster. Throughout this whole time the telescope stayed there too, and I caught him looking at it on way more than one occasion. When he showed up at my door one evening with a stuffed animal and a creepy smile yet again, I knew I had to take matters into my own hands. If the justice system wasn't going to help me, I would have to help myself. It took a lot of courage for me to do this, but the best thing I ever thought of was to play along. I had deducted that if I was going to be friends with him, he wouldn't hurt me. He was way too infatuated with me to ever do that, even if I was just friends with him. And so that's what I did. I kept him at a distance but pretended to befriend him. I invited him over for coffee. I knew that my brother would be in town that weekend and had his number on speed dial. When he walked in, he tried to hug me, but I shook his hand and led him to the kitchen counter. We talked while we drank coffee. He told me that I had the most beautiful bedroom and that I looked even better so close up. We only sat in the living room when he came over, so I knew then that he was referring to the times he'd watch me through the telescope. I felt a shiver run down my spine and forced a polite, "Thank you." It was getting late, and I told my brother to call me at exactly 6 p.m. to have an excuse to kick the stalker guy out of my house. It was 10 minutes before 6 when I realized I didn't know his name. He told me it was Joseph, and before I could give him a fake name, he said, "I enjoyed my time here with you, Mia," and tried again to hug me. I shook his hand once again and sent him off. Hearing him say my name was sickening. I felt violated. This nightmare was becoming a lot to handle, and after that encounter with him, I kept thinking if this was really such a good idea. However, I was still determined to stand for myself, and so I kept going along with it.